All right, folks, so welcome to the big show. And before we get to John Bolton, a few things to catch you up on, and we'll discuss this with the ambassador. Joe Biden in Ukraine, pledging support in meeting with Ukrainian leaders, threatening more sanctions. But, you know, been there, done that with Kerry, with Obama. It doesn't really seem to make any difference. So we'll certainly talk to John Bolton about that and how far he believes Putin will go. He wrote a great piece at National Review magazine that talks about the need for a new reset when it comes to dealing with Russia and actually dealing with Vladimir Putin. So we have that, and then we have the breaking news of the Supreme Court decision today upholding Michigan's ban on affirmative action. This was a proposition voted on by the people of the state of Michigan and the U.S. Supreme Court by a 6-2 margin. Elena Kagan recused herself, so even if she had gone in 6-3, this was not 5-4. This was not 5-4. Colleges cannot use racial quotas and preferences when dealing with admissions into college. And several of the justices, for instance, Justice Anthony Kennedy, writing for the majority, suggested that this right extends beyond college policies. He wrote, "There is no authority in the federal Constitution or in the courts' precedents for the judiciary to set aside Michigan laws that commit the voters to determination whether racial preferences may be considered in government's decisions, in particular with respect to school admissions." A lot of people interpret this to mean it goes beyond school admissions, and I'm sure they're going to raise that and push that, and well, they should. What do we need racial preferences for anymore? Why do we need quotas for anymore? You can't have it both ways. My goodness. The time has come. Time has come. And I think most people in America, the overwhelming amount of people in America, would believe that you succeed on your merits. You succeed on your merits. When I hear colleges and university professors now lament the fact that, oh, woe is me, how are we going to have diversity on campus? First of all, they don't want diversity of thought. They want diversity of skin color. So what does that mean? That blacks and Hispanics and whatever other bean counting they do can't qualify for college on their own merit? If that's the case, we have a real problem in education in this country, and we do have a real problem in education in this country. And don't say it's all money, because some of the highest per capita money spent on per student per capita in the country are some of the most terrible school systems in the country. So we'll deal with all that. All right, we're going to John Bolton joins us right now, but first we start with this little bit from Joe Biden.
We call on Russia to stop supporting men hiding behind masks in unmarked uniforms, sowing unrest in eastern Ukraine.
All right, folks, we are joined, as mentioned, by our friend Ambassador John Bolton, former UN ambassador to the United Nations and current senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Hello, sir.
Hi, Steve. How are you? Glad to be with you.
Glad you're feeling better. All right, before we get to Joe Biden in Ukraine and what he pledged and what he said, and before we get to your great piece on how we need a foreign policy reset to deal with Putin that I think you wrote for National Review, before we get to that, I just want to talk about the breaking news from the Supreme Court where they upheld Michigan's affirmative action ban. Of course, it was a proposition voted on by the people of the state of Michigan. It was challenged. It wound its way up to the Supreme Court, and by a 6-2 margin today, it was affirmed, and some of the justices writing in the majority even went so far as to imply that this should not only be limited to college admissions, but certainly other states and other areas where there's affirmative action.
No, I think it's a very significant decision. I think the vote is very significant, too. This is not one of these narrow 5-4 decisions. But I think the principle that the court articulates is correct and important, because what they have said repeatedly is that the country, individual states, can take race into account for remedial purposes. To overcome the legacy of slavery and discrimination, but that it's not constitutionally required to do that. And when you say it's permissible to take race into account, it follows inevitably that it is permissible for the people to come to a conclusion that they no longer need to take race into account, and that, in fact, certain ways of doing it are just wrong. You can't have a colorblind society, which is what we all profess to want, if you're counting by race. So this really puts the emphasis where it should be, in the hands of the people, in the political process, whether it's referenda or elections, and not in the hands of the unelected judiciary. And that's why I think many people are pointing to this decision as a precedent not only for college admissions, but in a wide range of other social activity as well.
Interesting that Sonia Sotomayor's dissent was 58 pages, and I'm told that was longer than the combined length of the 4 opinions in support of the outcome. So that must have been some dissent. All right, let's move on if we can, sir. You wrote a great piece for National Review magazine talking about how we need a better Russia reset, a foreign policy equipped to deal with the Putin regime as it is. We heard Joe Biden in Ukraine today offering support and threatening more sanctions, but you know it doesn't do any good. The rhetoric doesn't do any good. It just seems that there's total lack of respect or concern on the part of Putin when it comes to this administration and its resolve.
Well, unfortunately, for good reason, since the administration lives in a world of rhetoric rather than a world of action. So Joe Biden goes to Kiev as a show of political support for the Ukrainian government, but he doesn't bring anything with him. The headline this morning was that we had promised $50 million of aid. This is peanuts compared to the $20, $30, $40 billion that Ukraine already owes Russia for the oil and gas that Russia supplies, 80% of Ukraine's supply. We're playing with nickels and dimes, and the Russians are playing with really big numbers. And so when Putin and the Russians see this, and in fact when the Ukrainians see it, when our allies in Europe see it, they know that the administration's not serious. So not only doesn't it deter the Russians from further meddling in eastern Ukraine, I think it actually encourages them, because it proves that what happened in Crimea, that we allowed part of another country to be annexed into Russia and effectively did nothing, that same prospect could well hold for other annexations in Ukraine.
Yeah. All right. Let me ask you about something that I know you're familiar with, and I just saw it before we started the interview. Richard Cohn, writing in the Washington Post, no conservative he, says a Putin affiliate evokes Hitler. The West should be worried, and he's talking about a think tank, the head of a think tank associated with Vladimir Putin, responding to the comparisons or analogies between Putin and what he's doing here and Hitler and the reasons he went into countries, saying he had to protect German-speaking people, etc. And he said here, one must distinguish between Hitler before 1939 and Hitler after 1939. The thing is that Hitler collected German lands. This is chilling, is it not?
Well, it's stunning. I mean, the idea that that they can try and distinguish between the Hitler version 1, he was kind of okay, and then Hitler version 2, he was not okay. That just boggles the mind. Mein Kampf was written long before Hitler ever took power, and the anti-Semitism and the determination to destroy European Jewry was part of Hitler's thinking from the beginning. It's just that as time went on, he got more ability to do it. He didn't change his thinking at some point. But even beyond that, when you look at the current situation, that is a statement that it's not just Ukraine that's at issue for the Russians. It's all of the former republics, all of which have ethnic or cultural Russian populations. So it's exactly a reaffirmation, I think, of what Putin said back in 2006 when he was president of Russia the first time, and he said the breakup of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. This is another statement that Putin is prepared to use the existence of pro-Russian populations in these independent states to put pressure on them and perhaps even annex them or partition them.
And does this include NATO states?
Well, that's the $64 question. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania.
Boy, is that inflation, Mr. Ambassador? $64?
The three Baltic republics are extremely nervous, and I think Putin, again, looking at the weak response by NATO, by its leader, the United States, may well conclude that what he's got at issue here is not just Ukraine, not just the territory of the former Soviet Union. He's got a chance to drive a stake through the heart of NATO. I mean, something he could not have believed was possible when he started out trying to regain control over Ukraine after the overthrow of the Yanukovych government, but which has been opened up to him by the mistakes that Obama has made.
And let me ask you this before we get to your piece on the three-state solution, which was I saw in the Washington Times, which is very interesting for the Middle East. Are you planning on running for president? Are you still thinking about it? Are you exploring? I know there's a PAC. Where are you with that, sir?
Well, what I'm doing now is focusing on the 2014 House and Senate elections, and that's what the PAC and the Super PAC I've set up are designed to do, to help support House and Senate candidates who believe in a strong national security posture for the United States. And every day that goes by, what we see in Ukraine, what we see in the Middle East, what we're seeing in Asia, where the president's going today, shows what happens when you get a president who doesn't understand the kind of dangerous world we live in.
All right, and after the elections, is that when you'll decide if you'll pursue the presidency, or?
Well, I want to see what happens. I want to see who else is out there. I want to see if there are candidates who can seriously address national security issues. We've elected a president back in 2008 who has zero national security experience, and sadly, he demonstrates that he hasn't learned even from on-the-job training. We cannot risk that again.
So right now, I mean, doors are open. Nothing's closed yet.
No, nothing's foreclosed. That's
okay.
Right.
All right, now we got about 2 minutes left. Very interesting, and what you're calling for is that the Gaza Strip become a part of Egypt and the West Bank become a part of Jordan, in an effort to bring some I guess closure here to this mess that they call the Middle East peace talks.
Right. This is not what I propose, what I call the three-state solution. Egypt, Israel, and Jordan is by no means perfect. And I thought about it not because I was devising utopian schemes on a Saturday, but because I'm convinced, and I think all objective evidence demonstrates, that the two-state solution is simply not going to work. And this has been the focus of activity for 20 years or more, that there would be an Israeli state and a Palestinian state, and they'd live together in peace. The fact is, there's no legitimate Palestinian entity that can be relied upon to make hard commitments and carry them through. We've got terrorists in the Gaza Strip, and Fatah in the West Bank is utterly discredited. So if you conclude that the two-state solution can't work, then you have an obligation to come up with something else, which is how I derive this idea.
Yeah, no, very, very interesting, and I know it'll be talked about a lot. And, sir, we always are thankful for you talking with us, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Okay, glad to be with you.
Thank you. John Bolton, ladies and gentlemen, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, right here on the Steve Malzberg Show. The three-state solution. I mean, look, the two-state solution, the Palestinians' idea of that is two Palestinian states. One, a new state, and one, Israel, run over by Palestinians through the so-called right of return. This would put the onus on, the West Bank back to Jordan, Gaza back to Egypt, because that's where those properties came from. On the Steve Malzberg Show, the panel is next. Don't go away on Newsmax Television.